Alright, this is a lightsaber hilt, a bare lightsaber hilt from Savi's workshop at Galaxy's Edge. I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to document the process. So here we go. First bit is a, what are we talking, counterclockwise turn, push in, counterclockwise, and then the battery compartment comes out. There is your battery compartment. Undo that screw there. The bottom comes out and you can change the batteries, but I'm not interested in that, so I'll put that aside for now. Next up is we have these 4 screws on both the top side and the bottom side. These are this is a 2mm hex bit to get them out. I'm going to start with the bottom first. I believe you should always start with the bottom first. I will possibly show you why in a little bit. I have had this apart a couple of times already, but I am by no means an expert on the assembly or disassembly of this. This is more a matter of the ribbon cable that's in here has been torn to shreds, and I need to take a look at it because I believe one of the wires in the ribbon cable is broken, and I want to see if I can fix it, to at least temporarily, before I can get a replacement. So screws are removed, and that plastic cover comes off. We put that to the side. Now this can come down a little bit. There is the ribbon cable I was talking about, and a power cable. The power cable, those 2 wires run up the side and go up to the hilt. Those provide power to the lightsaber blade. It's plugged, or it's just a plug so you can unplug it. The ribbon connector has this little piece of black plastic you need to pull out to release the ribbon cable. So I'm using these curved tweezers here, coming from the sides of the connector here. And that removes the ribbon cable. This side of the ribbon cable, this end looks fine. The other end is in awful shape. Alright, I have not opened this up at all, and I don't know if I want to right now, because I don't know how this comes apart. You can see in the bottom here, SP and SP, those are the speaker pins, and then you have the positive and negative from the battery pack. So if we look at the base of the battery pack, we can see how that works. So how do you think this comes off? Because what it looks like to me, we have 2 screws here and here. I removed those out, and this black plastic base is probably going to want to come apart somehow. The problem is that this cap is probably holding the top end together, and how does it come apart? Alright, let's find out together. So let's just dig right in and see what happens. Wow, look at that. It wants to come apart right away. Come on. Yeah, fine. You hang in there. I think that was just a product of as I was unscrewing it. I think the screw was maybe catching on the second half and pulling it up as I was unscrewing it. So let's compare screws, by the way, while we're doing this. So that is your hex screw that held the gray sleeve on, and the Phillips head. Here's the Phillips, or is it posi drive? I never know. That held that in place. They look to be the same length, same, and they look like they're the exact same size, just one is a hex bit and one is a Phillips head. Interesting. Alright, so yeah, this bottom part wants to come out. Okay, that top piece just slid right off. I was expecting to put up more of a fight. Okay, this is where all the magic happens. And you have your springy pogo pins, which is where the battery and speaker contacts connect. The speaker is with the batteries. Here's the battery pack. The speaker is in there. And you can sort of see a couple of wires maybe coming in on the side here that connect to it. And that is all that this board does here. This board, it's just holds the connectors that go out to that. This middle board here, this is your main logic board. But I think I want to hold on to that for a minute. Need to be very careful here. That ring of copper wire, that is your RFID antenna. That is what detects the kyber crystals. Trying to be somewhat careful here in how I remove this. These PCBs are really in there. You know, I may just leave it as is right now. So here's the main logic board for the hilt. Underneath that rectangular blob of epoxy is where the main microcontroller is. And then you have some power chips. You have one chip right here, which I would like to identify. I believe this is the accelerometer. Let's see, how far in can we zoom? Very far, apparently. Can I get numbers off of that? Can you see that? It looks like Q, or is that O? OP. So we get OP 2.22. I believe that is the accelerometer. So that way, that's how the saber knows when it's being swung around. It can feel the hilt being moved around. Up top here, on the other side, that is an EM4095. That is the chip that reads or controls and reads the RFID chip up top here. The RFID antenna. It controls the RFID antenna, sends out signals through the antenna and receives it and processes it and ships the information that it reads off of the RFID tags back to the microcontroller. What is this board here for? Oh, alright. So this little white PCB underneath the RFID antenna, show it a little bit. It looks like it's got an RGB LED there. That's interesting. Oh, that is the RGB, that little white rectangle in the middle next to where it says RGB. That is the LED that turns on and lights up your kyber crystal from the bottom. And then on the side here, you can see this green PCB sort of attached perpendicular to that white one. And that chip right there, that is a Hall effect sensor. That is, it detects magnetic fields. That is how it knows how to turn on or when to turn the lightsaber on. I think I'm going to leave the rest of this alone and put it back together. The only question is, does anybody remember the orientation that this went in? Because I don't. So let's take a look real quick. I have this video here. There's a reason I'm recording, to document this, but let's say you're stuck and you don't know how. So we know it went like that. We know that this has to insert somehow. It's going to insert like this and then twist into place. Yep, we can see the groove. So it comes down like this and twists into place. So now we can see what that orientation should be like. We can see that how's it gonna go? It looks like it goes like that. Yeah. And we can see in the case here we have this little flat edge of plastic that should line up with the flat edge of the PCB, I'm guessing. Is that all it is? We have a notch. We have a notch on this piece of plastic, which should therefore match up with some kind of notch over here. Yes, there's the notch right there. So this is oriented in such a way that, or manufactured in such a way that I cannot put this in the wrong way. Just don't force it. I'm just tucking these wires off to the side a little bit so they don't get pinched. So now in theory, and that just slid right back together without any force at all. I feel pretty comfortable. Let's again do a quick test here. It feels like the battery fits exactly as it's supposed to, so I think that is back together correctly. So now where are those Phillips screws? Just want to put this back together now so I don't forget later how this went back together, because that would be a shame. Now, do you remember how this went on? Did it go on like that? Or like that? I think it went on like that. Yep, you can see this has a notch, or a little thing sticking out there, and there is a little notch in the plastic right there. Again, so there is no ambiguity to how this goes back on. Perfect. So I'm going to put that off to the side, and we can keep on working with this. So now we have the top half. So now I'm going to take out the other 4 hex screws, the 2.0 millimeter hex screws here. Okay, now this side I have taken apart before, and there's a couple of things to look out for. Now, you might be tempted right away to just pull up on this. What you're going to do is the ribbon cable here and the power cable are connected to this black piece here, which has a strong pressure fit to the silver plastic outside. So when you pull this back, you're going to see you're pulling those 2 cables with it as well. And you run the risk of yanking them out, especially if you have not taken the bottom off first. You risk yanking this out of the power socket there, and yanking this ribbon cable out, maybe even damaging it. So what I find works is instead hold the silver part, or the gray plastic part, and push down on the plastic here where the blade goes. There you go. So like we saw with the bottom part here, where we had this plastic cap at the one end and a screw or 2 at the other. Same thing here. Here is the screw underneath this clear plastic that just will slide off. We have the plastic, I don't know what you want to call that, cylinder that clamps the top end together. This does not come off easily. I know this from experience. So here we'll pull this out. You can see in this middle piece here there is this little plastic channel here where the cables run down the side, and it will slide out. See, you can slide it out that way, or preferably this way. And that lets you get the power and ribbon cables out. And you just need to remember that, well, what end gets this long piece? Is it going like that? Oh, look at that. That's clever. It's designed in such a way so it can only go one way. Beautiful. Again, so there's no chance of putting it in the wrong way. It can only go in one way. Put that off to the side. And now we can take this plastic piece off. All this is, the cross hatches help distribute the light of the LEDs that shine through these slots. So as you can see, this ribbon cable has seen, I'll just zoom in, has seen better days. It is chewed up. I had to already fix one wire near the connector here, because the cable had torn. Another one of these wires in this cable here has an intermittent issue, which means that the cable's torn, and if you bend it the right way it keeps the connection, but if you bend it the other way or you shake it loose, it loses connection. These are easy to replace. You can find these cables not necessarily in this orange color. The ones that I buy are white. They are 0.5 millimeter pitch forward direction cables, ribbon cables. This one has 8 pins on it, and it's 150 centimeters, and I have already ordered one. I'm waiting for it to arrive, and when it does, this will be replaced immediately. Okay, let's keep on going. One screw down at this end to remove. Phillips head, just like the other side. And now, just like the other side, the bottom part will separate. This top part is still being held together by this plastic sleeve. Oh, by the way, this is spring-loaded. This is just, once you unscrew it, take the screw out from the base here, this thing wants to go flying across the room. So just grab it and slightly pry the two sides apart and pull this out. Don't let it go flying across the room, which it will. Alright, so this is the hardest part for me in disassembling this, which is this top part, as I've mentioned, does not like to separate easily for whatever reason. I can't twist it or pull it off. It is clipped in pretty good. I find that the half that doesn't have the wires coming out of it, though, if you squeeze it a little bit, it will start to come loose. But you got to be careful about that PCB there being bent sideways, which I'm doing an awful job of. There's got to be a better way to take this apart. I don't know what it is. See, so bending it sideways like that, what am I risking here? I'm risking breaking the PCB, damaging the ribbon cable. You can see evidence of the one repair I've done so far to it. There are more repairs that I'll need to make to this if I want to use this again before the new ribbon cable shows up. I'm just going to disconnect that ribbon cable now. And now that will come free. And this is the power, this is the connector for the blade, data, ground, and 5 volts here. Your ground and 5 volts are the black and red wires. Data is the white wire. coming off of this PCB here. This PCB also has, you see a little micro switch. That is when the top part of the chamber that holds the kyber crystal, when you push up on this to insert the crystal, it's pushing this switch down. So the signal from this switch is sent back over this ribbon cable down to the base, where the microcontroller for the base for the hilt is. It knows, okay, somebody's inserted a kyber crystal, go ahead and try scanning for one. Let's see, a couple of notes about this. So I'll show you the top real quick. Fine. Again, what I'm doing here to get the rest of that sleeve off is squeezing from the sides here, so I'm deforming it a little bit and pulling it down, and that gets it removed. I'm noticing here there's some tape here. I'm not sure if that's if that's stock or if that's the previous owner trying to do something to keep this thing together. Alright, so what else is there? Don't forget which side had the wires coming out. Not too difficult. The biggest opening of both sides can only be the one that has the wires coming out. We have a spring here. There is a washer and then a spring. When you put this back together, you have this shelf here. You're going to pull the spring up. The bottom washer here stays where it is. Pull the spring up, so that way you have the unit being held in place partially by the pressure of the spring pushing down. That also makes it so that way this thing can't come out. Another thing to look for, see there's this little piece sticking out that needs to go into the grooves. And the last thing and I'll show you that real quick. Let's worry about the orientation later. So again, pull the spring down. Try to get it in the shelf there like that. Now try to find where the groove is. I can kind of already tell it's in place, because you can see how where it's wider here or taller, depending on your perspective. On the exact opposite side is the same thing. So that little piece sticking out, the little piece of plastic, is now on the opposite side, but in this little section here. And if I push down and rotate it, it's now in here, and the pressure of this spring is such that it's starting to torque it sideways, and you can't it won't want to stay in place with half of the plastic casing missing. So that's where you want to put it. The last thing to really worry about is the orientation of this. This is the one thing that I have put back in the wrong direction before, and I'm not sure of an easy way other than to grab yourself your lightsaber blade. Where is mine? There it is. Right, and try to make sure that it matches up. So if you look at your lightsaber blade, you have a thick metal stud and a thin metal stud, or a big and a small, we'll call it. And if you look on the side, you don't need both sides. You can just look at one side. You can see you have a gap here, and you have a gap on the other side. One of these gaps is bigger than the other because there's a corresponding big gap on the other half, or a corresponding little gap on the other half, to accommodate those these metal studs. So we can figure out which one is the big one. Right, there we go. Which one is the little one? Yep. And now we know that this is how it's going to go into the blade, into the hilt here. Does it match up? Well, let's see. You can see the two pins on one side where my thumb is here and one pin on the side where my thumb is now. That's the exact opposite of how the blade fits in here. So this is in backwards right now, so I need to turn it around. One more, all the way around, like that. So now you can put it in here and it fits. And that is how you know whether or not that is in the right orientation. If you take yours apart this far, be very careful about this, because the first time I took it apart and put it back together, I didn't realize this was in the wrong orientation until after everything was back together. So that is about it for a teardown of the saber chassis, hilt, whatever you want to call it. I'm not taking this thing apart. There's no reason to, and I'll tell you why. All that's in here is a PCB. It's just like we saw in the base earlier with the pins for the speaker and power there. The PCB just has these pogo pins on it. That's it. And they're spring-loaded. The springs are separate from the pins. They go between the pin and the PCB. You take this apart, those springs will go flying, and getting this back is a pain in the butt. I know this because I didn't realize it when I first took it apart, how difficult it was. So don't take this apart. There's no reason to, not unless for whatever reason you need to reconnect these wires. Hopefully you should never have to. Anything else? Oh, maybe we'll take a note real quick. So there is the hole where the wires go out of. So this is the side that where the wires go out of, and the orientation is the data pin, right? Goes on the side where the wire hole is. That's a good way to ID how this is set up. Alright, so I'll just put that back in. Yep. Grab the blade. Put that in. Prove to myself, yes, that is exactly the orientation it should be. I think that's about it. The only thing that I'm staring at right now are these three surface mount LEDs, which is also interesting because you can see here there's pads for a second type of LED that they apparently didn't go with, but they designed this PCB so it could accept two different types of LEDs. These side projecting LEDs, these are the same LEDs that are used in the holocrons. And one of mine burnt out, and I ordered some replacements online, but the ones I ordered online are too bright. I replaced the LED with one of my new ones, and it was so bright it stood out. It outdid everything else. So I removed it because it's just a dark spot on the holocron right now. I might remove these three and replace them with my replacements that I originally bought for the holocron, simply because it's easier. It's only 3 LEDs to remove and put back on. And then use one of the ones that I've removed here, put it into the holocron. So I have a fully functioning holocron. And then I'll get the added benefit of this thing will be incredibly bright. So when you've got the chassis apart, or when you got the covering, the metal coverings off, and you've got it's set up like this, so you have your plastic lens here, and there are LEDs shining through it, and they're kind of dim. Well, now I'll have super bright ones. So I think that is what I am going to do before I put this all back together. That, and obviously I need to examine this ribbon cable, because somewhere in here there's a break. Now you can see already the pin farthest to the bottom of the screen. There we go. There was a break there. I soldered that. That is not a break in the second pin just above it. That is a break in when I scraped off the orange plastic covering here, so I could solder a pin across the break. I scraped away some of the covering over the second pin, And when I was soldering it, some solder got over to the exposed copper, so it looks like there's a break. It's not. It's still connected. But for example, you can see some dark spots there. One of those is likely a break. Boy, that looks suspect as well. Another dark spot where there's a potential break. So you can see that this cable has been abused a bit, and it really needs to be replaced. So that's why I took this thing all the way apart, and I'll have the side benefit of brighter LEDs.